Hey, Washington campus. Today we are going to continue our devotional on 1 Peter. Over the last several weeks, we have covered most of the book, and today I want to look at chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. And in these 4 verses, Peter is going to lay out some radical views on leadership. And it should not surprise us that what God has to say about leadership and what the world says a leader should be and a leader should do are not often the same. And so let me read the passage, and then we're going to pull out 3 important principles regarding biblical leadership. 1 Peter 5, verses 1 through 4. So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. One of the first things we see that Peter tells us is the motivation for leadership. And the motivation is to serve others. Notice what he says. He exhorts them to shepherd the flock of God. You think about a shepherd, and God uses this illustration, this analogy throughout the Bible, that a biblical leader is a shepherd. A shepherd exists for what? For the welfare of the sheep. To shepherd means to feed, to provide for, to care, to protect, to watch over. And so when we lead in the church, we are leading for the benefit of others. It's not about us. And that's why Peter says it's not for shameful gain. It's not for sordid gain. We don't do this for our own personal benefit. And let's just think about that for a second. Like worldly leadership, worldly promotion is often very much for the benefit of that leader. They get more financial gain. They get more authority. They get a greater platform. Biblical leadership is the exact opposite. It's not about what the leader gets out of it. It's what those who he leads, it's what they get out of it. It's how they benefit, how they grow. And so our motivation as leaders in the church is to be for the benefit of others. It's not about us. And don't miss that what Peter says is we should be eager to do this. We shouldn't be serving others because, well, we have to or we're told to. This is something that a leader should want to do. He should be concerned about the welfare, the spiritual growth, the spiritual health of those that he leads. Then the next thing we see in this passage is not just the motivation for leadership, but the method of leadership. And this is good stuff, is that a biblical leader has to set an example. Notice what he says. Again, this is now in verse 3. He says, not domineering. Other translations say not lording over. So we don't lord over, we don't domineer those that we lead. Remember in Matthew 20, Jesus said this directly. He said, hey, that's how the Gentiles lead. That's how the world leads. They dominate, they lord over those they lead. But it's not to be so among us, not to be so among us in the church, but biblical leaders are servant leaders. And this is a really challenging concept. And I'll be honest, as a pastor, this is something that is very sobering to me, that we can't run away from the fact that biblical leaders are called to set an example. We're not perfect, but we are called to set an example for those who we lead. Paul said it this way in 1 Corinthians 11. He said, be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ. And so we can't run from that responsibility, and it's a great one. A leader needs to be able to set that example that others can follow. And how wonderful it is, right, when a church has that, when a church has godly men that others can look to say, wow, that's what it looks like to follow Jesus. I want to do that. And so that's important, and it's biblical. And we have to understand this as leaders. It's not just about throwing our weight around, telling people what to do. It's about setting an example that people want to follow. I heard this years ago. I love this saying. They say that if you are a leader and no one is following you, guess what? You're not leading, you're just out taking a walk. See, people may obey a command, but they will follow an example. So we need to serve others, and we need to set an example for them. But Peter's not done. He gives a very great reminder in verse 4. He says, and when the chief shepherd appears. This is reminding us that if you have a position of biblical leadership, if you have a position of leadership in the church, you are not in charge. The church belongs to Jesus. It is his church, and he said, I will build it. He is the one who's in charge. We are stewards when we are given positions of leadership in the church. And so we have to remember there's a chief shepherd, that we are accountable to, and it is his church. As pastors and leaders, we have to be very careful using personal pronouns. It's not my church. These aren't my people. The church belongs to Jesus, and they are his people. And Peter knew this first and foremost, right? If you remember in John 21, when Jesus speaks to Peter, and he asks Peter 3 times, do you love me? And Peter goes through that, and he responds 3 times. And every time Jesus responded to Peter's response, Jesus' exhortation, his command was to do what? Was to feed my sheep. Jesus reminds Peter, these are my sheep, and I'm going to ask you to feed them. And so a great reminder here from Peter that there is a chief shepherd that every leader is accountable to. And so what do we take away from all this? Well, we need to be clear, Peter is clear, that the standards for leadership in the church are high. We need to place the needs of others above our own, and we need to follow Jesus in such a way that people will want to follow our example. And what's good about this, what's really neat, is that this model of leadership, this holds true no matter who you are or no matter where God has you in life. Whether you're a parent or a pastor, whether you're an elder or a school teacher, whether you're a mom or a missionary, you can apply this principle of leadership. You can put the needs of others above your own, and you can determine to set an example that they want to follow. Wherever God has you, you can apply these biblical principles of leadership. Well, I hope to see everybody on Sunday. Until then, let's love the Lord, let's love each other, and let's press on.